All right, so in the last video we talked about values and beliefs and how every society, every culture has some sort of system of values and beliefs where they deem what's good and bad and make these assumptions about what is true in their society, but not every member of the culture always buys into or practices behaviors that align with the culture's value and belief system, right? So this has to do with the concepts of ideal versus real culture. So values portray what's referred to as ideal culture, which are the standards a society would like to embrace and live up to. However, not everyone, like I said, always buys into and embraces the values of a culture, which is where we get real culture. So real culture is the way society really is based on what actually occurs and exists. So this is kind of the distinction between maybe what we aspire to versus what we actually do as a culture, as a society. So for example, in the last slide, the last presentation, we talked about how in the United States we value good health and maybe we value marital monogamy, but so those might be ideal culture, right? Aspects of our ideal culture, but in terms of real culture, we know that obesity is an increasingly growing problem in the United States. We also know that a number of people who are married engage in non-fidelity, they have marital affairs, they cheat on their significant others, etc. So our ideal culture rarely ever lines up completely with our real culture. Another example, in an ideal culture, there would be no murders, no unplanned pregnancies or homelessness, but in real culture, right, in the society that we actually live in, we need police officers, educators, lawmakers, and social workers to constantly work to repair and address these social problems that affect millions of members of our society today. So can you think of any other values we have in U.S. culture? Do you think these values are part of ideal culture? So we as a society really like the idea. Theoretically, it's something that we aspire to achieve. Or is it real culture? Is it something that we as a society actually practice instead? Can take some time and think about some examples, but I think we've gone through enough here. There's more provided in the textbook chapter for this week and in the crash course video, so let's leave it at that. So let's talk more specifically about norms. Norms are a very, very, very important aspect of the science of sociology. So every society develops a set of expectations for what is the right way or the good way to reflect its values and beliefs. And that's where we get norms. Norms are the expected behaviors or rules intended to guide people in any given society. So norms are basically what we consider to be normal or taken for granted aspects or rules of our particular culture. Every society has norms, right? Every society has just kind of taken for granted assumptions that they expect are some things that are behaviors or values that every member of the society buys into, right? For example, like we said before, it's a norm in our society when you meet someone for the first time to greet them with a hello, how are you, or even offer a handshake. Those are norms of U.S. culture, right? It's a norm that when, you're sitting as a student in a college classroom, you're going to take a seat and sit down for the duration of the class period and not be disruptive, only speak if you're asked a question. You hear my dogs playing in the background. Right, so we have norms in every aspect of our society, things from classes that we take part in, to our workforce, to our families, religious customs, all of them have expected behaviors or rules that members in that particular group or particular society are expected to follow, and they're taken for granted, right? Norms are, however, socially constructed. So when we say something is socially constructed, it means that we as a society created that expectation or created that assumptive behavior or practice to be normative or expected in the first place, right? There's no reason that we in a society decided to use the word hello when we greet someone, or to use a handshake as a symbol for greeting someone for the first time. That was a norm that our society created. Just as in other societies, it's a norm to greet someone for the first time with a bow, right? That's a different norm that's different from different cultures and different societies. Right. Another example, this picture came from the textbook. At many parts in Africa and in the Middle East, it's considered normal for men to hold hands in friendship. In America, though, that's typically not something we would expect two people of the same gender to do, to just be walking down the street holding hands, especially men in our society, because of the homophobic tendencies that our society has, you know. I have been in predominantly same-gender relationships for the last decade of my life, and I know that it is not a norm to see two men in most places that I've lived in the United States holding hands down the street. And there's a fear that if you are seen engaging in this behavior, since it challenges a norm in our society, you could potentially be punished for breaking the norms. So that's something really important about norms, which we'll talk about in just a minute here. As a society, we kind of have this societal buy-in, this group expectation that every member of our society should feed into and practice the norms that we've established because we consider them to be good or foundational values of our society. So, therefore, if someone breaks a norm of our society, if someone challenges this expectation or rule that we as a society have put into place, you can have some negative consequences. And that's where we get into sanctions. So sanctions are reactions, which can be either positive or negative, we'll talk about in a minute, people receive for either following or breaking norms of a particular culture. All right? So if you follow a norm of a society, of a culture, you'll receive a positive sanction. You'll be rewarded if you follow the norms of your society. For example, you know, if when you greet someone for the first time, if you greet them with a smile and a handshake, you're probably going to be positively sanctioned by being returned and receiving a greeting in return of a smile and a handshake, indicating, hey, we agree this is a cultural practice we're both on board with. This is good. We're having a pleasant interaction. If, however, you go up to meet someone for the first time, if I walked up to you for the first time, I've never met you before, and instead of saying hello with a smile and shaking your hand, I looked at you like this and was like, I'm not going to touch this person. I'm not going to say hello. You, in return, would probably look at me like, whoa, what's wrong with you? You know, where are your manners? Might even say something to that effect. That would be a negative sanction, right? We're kind of punishing people for doing something bad in our society. So sanctions can be material, right? Positive material sanctions might be winning a prize, right? Some money or a trophy or a medal, for example, if you win a competition as a child, right? So those are positive material sanctions. They could also be negative material sanctions. You know, for example, if you break a law in our society, right? If you get a speeding ticket, you're breaking a norm that we as a society have established, right? We've created this norm in our society that we are expected to follow the speed limits when we're driving our cars. And if you break that norm, you could be punished and receive a material negative sanction as a fine, right? Or a speeding ticket. Or sanctions can also be symbolic or non-material. So for example, simply receiving a smile or a compliment, right? When you're a child, if you answer a question right in the classroom, your teacher might say, "Good job, Timmy. You know, you did such a great job answering that question." That's a positive sanction, reaffirming this positive behavior. This student answered a question right. You know, it's a norm for students in classrooms to demonstrate that they're learning. So when they engage in that positive, appropriate, normative behavior, they get a positive sanction in return. On the flip side, negative sanctions can also be in the form of harsh words and gestures, you know? Like I said, if you greet someone in a non-normative way, right, you might get a weird look. If you're driving and you are caught picking your nose and the person in the car next to you sees you, they might point and laugh like, ha ha, you're picking your nose, right? That's a negative reaction, a negative sanction, and it teaches us that we did something bad and we should not be doing that. We felt guilty or felt shamed by engaging in this non-normative behavior, and to correct that to line up with our society's value system and the norms that are in place, you need to not do that in the future, right? So if I follow the norm of greeting someone with a hello and a handshake, I may be positively sanctioned with a smile in return. However, if I break the norm and flick someone off and I meet them for the first time, I may be negatively sanctioned by being frowned or cursed at, right? Sanctions, in this sense, are a form of social control. They are a way we as a society encourage conformity to cultural norms, right? Here's just another funny video that show you how sanctions work. What happens when you break a norm in our society, when you go against a behavior of something normative.
There is a huge fundraising deadline coming up for Senate Democrats, and they need your help right now. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Daily Dropout. My name's Steven. Today I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, and this is Staring at Strangers on the Escalator. Also, we just dropped a brand new line of merch, including this shirt. So if you like it, hop over to dailydropout.com and enjoy the video.
What's up? What's up? What's going on, man? You got a problem or something?
Hey, we're just making a fun video.
What's the deal?
We're just making a fun video called, like, Staring at Strangers.
You're an idiot, bro.
My bad, dude.
You're an idiot. You'll get your ass knocked the f*** out.
My bad, dude. Is it cool if we use that for the video, or...? You can just walk around with alcohol here, right?
Yeah. Pretty sure.
I've been told. Everything all right? What's your name, bud? You have real intense eye contact, right? Where'd you get that? Looks good.
All right, so it's pretty much the same thing for a few more minutes. There's the link to the video in the actual slides this week if you want to continue watching that. But basically, that's just another example of how these people that are engaging in these behaviors, in this instance, making sustained eye contact with strangers, which is definitely going against or challenging a norm in our society, seeing how they get responded to, right? Those negative sanctions that he received, this individual received for sustaining eye contact with strangers, were like a form of punishment, right? Don't do that. In that one instance, the one guy, the first guy that he did it with, almost came and kicked the shit out of him because he was so pissed off that this stranger was breaking this norm in our society, right? So when we break norms in our society, we get negatively sanctioned. And the purpose of negative sanctions is that they're a form of social control. They encourage us to conform to the norms. The flip side of that is that sometimes if we follow norms, we might receive a positive sanction, which is just a way that society is rewarding us for following these normative behaviors that we've established, right? Sociologists, we are so interested in norms. Who decides what is considered normative behavior in a society? You know, how does a society come to agree upon a value or a belief so strongly and collectively that it gets established as a norm? Those are really interesting sociological questions. Sometimes I challenge or even ask my students for an assignment to go out in their everyday lives and to break a norm that exists in our society. However, this can get a little dangerous sometimes because, as you saw in the video, depending on who you break a norm in front of, people can respond differently. But one of my favorite ones to do, which usually doesn't cause too much of a turf, but is still really interesting, is to stand the wrong way in a busy elevator, right? So go in an elevator where even there's just one or two other people in there, and instead of facing the doors, face the opposite way, face the back of the elevator, and just stand facing people the wrong way in an elevator, right? And see how they react. A lot of times people are going to get uncomfortable or like look around like, is this person okay? Are they mentally stable? Because we're socialized to follow these expected norms in any society that we're a part of. So there's three different types of norms that we typically talk about in sociology. Folkways are informal rules that kind of go without saying. It's not illegal to violate a folkway, but doing so may result in a negative sanction. So the example of standing the wrong way in an elevator would be example of a folkway, breaking a folkway, wearing a tube top for a job interview, directly staring at a stranger on an escalator, for example, for long periods of time. Again, you're not typically going to be violating any sort of laws if you break a folkway, but you still might receive a negative sanction. A moray, on the other hand, which looks like Moors but it's pronounced moray, are more official and morally informed than folkways and morally informed right and wrong behaviors. Mores tend to be formalized as rules, written rules and laws of a society, and they're almost always negatively sanctioned. So for example, not wearing a shirt to your office job, you could get fired. Cheating on an exam, you get kicked out of school, examples. So those would be example of breaking mores. Taboos, on the other hand, the most severe form, violations of norms that are crucial to a society's moral center. Taboos prohibit certain behaviors so strictly that violating them always results in extreme disgust.